Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool prototype preview for you today from a actual new brand that will be coming to Kickstarter. It is called HVD, or Handwound Vintage Design, and they're basically a Singapore-based micro brand owned and operated by husband and wife team Travis Tan and Vivian Ko. Now, you might recognize Travis's name because he's actually was also the founder of RZE, which we reviewed not too long ago. So very cool to see them really kind of expanding their reach and trying new things, especially within this very different market, very German kind of style before, very minimalist and modern. And here you kind of go on the other side of it, on the very vintageized size and style, which I think is quite cool. Now, HVD really, their whole ethos is to combine hand-wound mechanical movements with very super vintage styling, pretty much, to produce a really well-crafted, vintage-inspired timepiece at an affordable price, which is always very nice. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this, of course, a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking at a dive watch, you're going to want, of course, some water resistance, typically through some type of screw-down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. Now, this is going to be their premier model, the Spectre diver, and essentially it's just a vintage inspired dive watch, and it does that really well. But how does it differentiate itself? Well, I think it does in a lot of neat kind of ways in terms of the fit, the finish, the design, and the real just general flow of the watch. Now, this will be coming to Kickstarter in July, which is this month, so pretty soon this year in 2021, depending on when you're watching this. Now, the first 300 pieces are going to go for $399 as a bit of an introductory price, and then anything after that will be the $459 in terms of the duration of the Kickstarter campaign. So with all that said, let's go ahead, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, now as you can see, of course, quite handsome and really classic diameters here in terms of the dimensions. You got a 40 millimeter diameter with a 12.5 millimeter thickness, 48 millimeter lug to lug, although of course the male end links do protrude slightly more, but you can see it does hang nicely, and it does have a very natural sweep and flow to it, so I wouldn't worry too much about that if you are on the extremely small wrist side. Of course, it is made out of 316L surgical grade stainless steel. It's pretty much all brushed with some very nice high polished accents, and you're also going to notice drilled lugs, which is definitely kind of correct for the period. And then we get over to this beautiful crystal. It's a double domed plexiglass. I'm not huge into plexiglass myself, but I feel like, with the other specs and the overall theme of the watch, it fits. It's really meant to be a vintage inspired watch, so it has vintage inspired components in terms of, okay, yeah, you're getting you're getting that plexiglass, which is something you can buff out if there are any issues. It's way less likely to crack than sapphire, and it's going to be a lot easier to buff out in terms of any type of scratches that do happen. So I would probably rather have plexiglass over something like a basic mineral crystal. I do like kind of proprietary blends when it comes to minerals, like what Seiko uses in their Hardlex. But for something like this, I think the plexiglass works great. It also ties in very nicely to, of course, that aluminum insert on the bezel there, which is a 120 click unidirectional, rotating action. That doesn't feel super vintage. This feels way better. Oh yeah. Fast, slow. That is a really nice bezel action. Look at that. I'm trying to show you some backplay, but it's not showing it because there is none. And it lines up really well, so that's always a bonus. Seiko has really made me come to appreciate the little things like the 12 o'clock loom pip lining up perfectly. So very nice from that standpoint. The crown on here, is going to be a push-pull crown for production. Of course, this is going to have additional seals and whatnot, so it can still maintain its 20 atmospheres of water resistance. Right now, it is on this prototype, it's actually a screw-in crown, and I don't think for me, it hasn't really bothered me in terms of being a screw-in with a hand-wound watch. I feel like the positions work fine as is, but I can definitely see, some people are just not comfortable with putting more wear and tear on on basically the crown and tube and whatnot when you're dealing with something that is going to be constantly having to be wound. Now, for me, I wouldn't think of this as something that needs to constantly be wound because I probably wouldn't wear this every day. This is definitely more something, a great piece within a collection, not necessarily like a one watch candidate. Although it is quite versatile for what it is. I think you can see, that gilt style with the really creamy aged patina there, the faux tina. It's a good look, and there's a reason why so many other brands have done that, and why not a smaller brand actually get in on some of that action too. But you can see the crown is really nicely done and nicely sized. It definitely has that big crown, quote unquote, appearance to it. The case shape is outstanding, guys. Look at just the beautiful bevels on here, as you can see. And then we get to the case back, which is surprise. This is something that is less vintage, but I think still ties in because, yeah, you're getting a manual wound movement there, and it's a display back, and it looks great. It just ties in so well. You're seeing the multiple finishes and tones and materials within the movement, and it's very nice. I think it really does help you kind of make a connection with the watch. Of course, just any type of mechanical movement, whether it be automatic or just hand wound, for me is going to be preferable, but in this case it just has a way of kind of being very all-inclusive in terms of its design and its theme and that execution. So I'm digging that. And the movement inside there was your Sellita SW210-1 hand wound movement, which basically is just like an SW200 without the rotor. So that's all you need to know about that. So it does have all the modern niceties you'd expect in terms of hacking and, of course, hand winding. And then we get to this dial, and I think that's where things get very, very cool. My goodness. The handset on here, guys, the applied indices, very nice. You also have this matte kind of gradient dial with a distressed finish to it, as you can see. And I don't know, there's just something about it. I've seen these types of approaches on other models, but I feel like it works better on something like this that is meant to be vintage and vintageized, and within that kind of the Fotina and everything just ties in to it, giving it a bit of a worn and weathered look out of the gates. Not everybody wants a super crisp pair of blue jeans. A lot of times you like something that just feels and looks a little bit worn in, and this is that. It's not like it's overly distressed. It just has I think a good balance from that standpoint in terms of aesthetics. And then of course the actual application in terms of the execution is really quite nice. You see those applied indices, they're really well done, highly polished. The loom is well applied as well, which we'll get to that when we get to the loom shots. This is Swiss Superluminova. In terms of water resistance, like I mentioned earlier, you're getting 200 meters or 20 atmospheres or 660 feet, depending on how you want to measure it. You are getting 20 millimeter lugs, and you can see the case shape does have that straight crossover for the lugs, which makes it perfect for straps. And the nice thing is, because of the thickness, it actually will wear quite well with straps. But for me, put this thing on a Tropic, wow, screams, love it. And then or a really nice kind of high-end NATO or sailcloth strap, and you're really going to have something really quite special where you can kind of take it up a notch. This bracelet is quite nice. I mean, it's nothing super fancy in terms of the realm of a faux rivet bracelet, but it does look nice. It's well executed from that standpoint. It has a beautiful taper. We got the 20 millimeter at the lug, tapers down to 16 millimeters, and then you do have this nice push button clasp here, all fully milled, of course, nicely chamfered there, and nicely signed as well. So, and then you also do get a few micro adjusts. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, wears really, really well. It's not super small sized. Again, 40 millimeters really being that sweet spot. Some people might think something like this should maybe come in a little bit of a smaller size. Some people just can't live without them being larger sizes. You really can't make everybody happy, but 40 millimeters for a diver does tend to be a bit of the sweet spot for most. And I think you can see the way that it sits on the wrist. Goodness, look at how flat it sits there. It has a nice round curvature there on that sweeping lug that does help it wrap. And then you do have a nice compartmentalized profile where you're getting a thin mid case with a bit of a, kind of a top hat situation when you look at the bezel combined with that really nice plexiglass crystal, which is very, very clear. Of course, when you have something like, let's say, a sapphire, at certain harsher angles, you can get a bit of a milkiness and kind of an opaque effect at really harsh angles. Here, still going to be very, very clear, very precise. So that is one of the, I'd say, objectively nice things about a plexiglass for those of you like myself who really don't go looking for plexiglass equipped watches. There are definitely some things that are objectively, very nice about them. But for me, I don't like when we try to blend them with more modern things. In this case, it being really sticking to that vintage style. I find it, of course, within the theme. So it does get a pass from me in this case. But this wears really great, guys. Look at that. And even from this profile, you could imagine me rolling my wrist and you seeing another, a different logo on there, and probably imagining this to be a much more expensive watch than $399. I mean, and a good amount of people, 300 people, are going to get this for $399, which I think is a great deal. I mean, you're getting that great hand-wound Swiss Salida movement, and then, in terms of the execution on the rest of it, it absolutely works. This is quite a handsome timepiece within that genre in terms of course, vintage Big Crown inspired divers. So with all that, let's actually set it up for some loom shots, low light transition, and get into some closing thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, wow, that is some killer loom. The loom pip, not quite as pronounced, and I think that just has to do generally with the size and the scale. Something I think I would have preferred was a larger loom pip. For the actual production, maybe they'll be able to bump it up. It's my understanding that this is the second prototype, and the original first round of prototypes actually had an even smaller loom pip. So this is them increasing the size a bit. But again, ties into the vintage aesthetic. Doesn't have to necessarily be a loom monster, but boy is it nice when it is pumping away just like that. But one thing I do like to work in when I get these loom shots going is some low light transition, because you're not always going to be in optimal lighting, out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of a building, walking underneath an overhang, maybe just generally indoors, or spending time within your favorite vehicle. So it's nice to see what this thing will look like in less than optimal lighting, to include transitional lighting here, where you're going to be able to kind of see how these tones will work and play in terms of legibility in mixed lighting situations, even in very harsh lighting, as you can see over here, or you get something very high contrast, which typically will capture any types of defects or anything from that standpoint in the finish. And in this case, you're actually getting a very good look at the distressed nature of that dial and the life that it kind of takes on, which is quite nice. But when you look at the actual metal on the case and the bracelet links there, you can see that it's quite a uniform glide of light that goes over there. So really nicely done from a brushing standpoint. I wouldn't consider it anything within like some type of junior grade luxury level or approaching anything special like that. But in terms of a tool watch, micro brand watch under $500, it absolutely is doing the job and doing it really quite well. So you can see here, guys, even when I get out of range, you can see really it's still quite legible. Of course, the 12 o'clock orientation, some of you might be complaining about that because it is a no date. So you don't have the 3 o'clock date window or 6 o'clock date window to kind of offset to say, hey, when is 12? So some people might be upset about that. Some people might be upset about there not really being any lume on the seconds hand. But again, you know, I don't think this is going to be anybody's dedicated everyday dive watch. I think this is something that's really, you know, it fits a special niche. It's a desk diver, and it inspires a bit of a story with it in terms of kind of the look, the overall fit, finish, the feel, and again, going back to that theme and that execution in theme. So closing thoughts from me on this one, guys. On the wrist, very nice proportions, absolutely comfortable, nice balance wear. It just screams that vintage big crown aesthetic. It's kind of a bit of a Seiko 62 MAS meets Omega Seamaster 300. It just has certain, you know, but it doesn't look like an homage to either of those watches. It just has certain elements that I like from both of those references, and it blends them together well with also some of its own design language where you know, things just kind of come together in a really fun way. And I think there's just a nice flow to the overall theme on this one. And again, it just might not have everything, but what it does have all kind of comes together, which I can appreciate. Now, in terms of comparable models, guys, in that $400 to $500 micro brand diver space, it's absolutely full of vintage reimaginings. But, you know, I think the Spectre diver does go in to that space with an all-in mentality. So in terms of the theme, it just, yeah, again, it just does it all. Everything kind of fits. Everything makes sense. You get a manual wound movement. It's a bit of a throwback. You're getting the plexiglass, you know, domed crystal. You're getting that aluminum insert, which can be patinaed and can be, you know, worn in over time and pick up some more, you know, just some more character that you can individualize as you go. I mean, this thing with like a ghost bezel, you know, eventually kind of grayed out from just being out in the sun, I think that would look outstanding. Or if you want to rush that, maybe you take a little bit of bleach to that insert there on the bezel, and you can still have something really cool. So I do think there's quite a bit of, I guess, just a heightened level of charm and kind of the backstory and the purposeful concept, right? You got this husband and wife team. You have this, you know, it ties into that hand-wound vintage design, just mission statement from that standpoint, and then it all culminates to this model. And in terms of model variations, definitely check the links for updates and availability in terms of their Kickstarter and the actual, you know, their .com kind of e-commerce site. Check those out in terms of some of the different options. I'm not sure if that's 100% set yet. Again, this is a pre-production prototype. So yeah, definitely check back. You'll probably find some cool green dials, white dials, and all types of really great fun color combinations. So for me, guys, bottom line here, really great vintage inspired looks. You know, again, it's still far from an homage. with, I think, a really well curated feature set that all add value to the vintage inspired theme. Again, it just feels right. There's not, oh, I wish they would have done this, or I wish they would have done that. It all just kind of comes together in a really nice, tidy package. And it's, yeah, it's very nice. I'm digging it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.